Hey everyone, Internet Vicious book reader here. Today I want to talk about Our Moon by Rebecca Boyle. Look, this book is a historical science look into our moon, and I'm just a guy who read books. I'm nowhere qualified to call myself a scientist just because I read a couple of these books. I did try to add some of my own research while fact-checking the book to at least translate the book into a somewhat cohesive video format to my mess of a head, but I do recommend to read the book to get the full extent of what the book offers, since I'm sure that I cannot find a way to fully incorporate what the book offers into the video. I just put some of the things that I think people might need for testing the book. Recently also I found out that some people still unironically think that we've only been to the moon that one time with Neil Armstrong, and that NASA is the only organization that have reached the moon, which is not true. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's go back a little bit. During World War II, there are many wars that are done all over the place. One of these wars is the Battle of Tarawa, where America tried to ambush the island that has been taken over by Japan at that time. The war goes on for 4 days from 20 to 23 November, and it opened in the worst way possible for the Americans. They were waiting for the tide to go up to do an ambush, but no matter how much time they waited at night, the tide did not rise in their favor. So they attacked while being gunned down by the Japanese army that stayed on the island. The American side lost dozens of their army with more than double the injury, and their transport ship didn't even arrive on the island. All because the tide is much lower than usual and it did not rise no matter how long they waited that night. It was not until decades later when scientists found the reason why during the War of Tarawa, the tide did not go in their favor that night on 20th November 1943. Every day on Earth, the tide changes in every coastline on Earth. There's an ebb and flow to how beach widen and narrow as the sea rise and fall. It's because Moon's gravity and to a lesser extent Sun's gravity affected sea level. The side of the Earth closest to the Moon feels the tug of Moon's gravity, causing high tide, and twice a month when the Moon and the Sun line up, causing full Moon or the invisible full Moon. The tide rises even higher due to the combination pull of the Moon and the Sun. These are called spring tides, which cause higher high tides and lower low tides. 7 days after the spring tide, which is called the first quarter or the last quarter, is when the Moon is not lined up with the Sun. They are apart at a 90-degree angle, making them look half moon. The Sun gravity has less impact on the tide here and causes neap tide. The high and low tides are less extreme here. Then the Moon's orbit, which is like all celestial body, forms an ellipse. And in this ellipse, when the Moon is furthest from the Earth, it is called apogee, and when it is closest to the Earth, it is called perigee. During the attack in 20th November, the American invaded during the rare combination of neap tide and apogee, which only happened twice during 1943, with 20 November being one of them. That's why the tide not only is lower than usual, but it also did not rise at all. Because of how much damage the attack has caused, after this, reading the moon movement became a regular part of war. And the story is just one small insignificant part of how the moon affected Earth and how it affected us. The book will try to bring us on a journey on this long history of the moon, starting in talking about the moon itself. Now, unlike Earth, the moon had no air and water. So dust from all the objects that smash to it sticks and stays around everywhere and in the space surrounding it. Water does technically exist on the moon, but since the moon had no protective atmosphere, there's no way for liquid water to exist. The no atmosphere thing is also why there's more craters compared to Earth, and everything smells burnt since it receives direct radiation to it. The craters are especially worse on the far end side. Thanks to the Chang'e 4 robot sent by China in 2019, we see traces of what could be mountains there. Thanks to this small robot that we sent there and the landing from Apollo 11 to 17 excluding Apollo 13, we know more about Moon than ever now. It is so empty, so desolate, and because there's no air to make sounds travel, there is no sound other than the ones that vibrates on you. It's lonely like nothing else. I think that's why it fascinates us and why there are a lot of legends and theories about creation of Earth and Moon. But the closest we ever got to how violent the process might have been is from the oldest one, which is Sumerian 7 tablets of creation, or Enuma Elish, where the god Marduk split his great-great-grandmother Tiamat into two, creating heaven and earth. From the materials we got from the moon, which consists of both alien materials not found on Earth and materials found on Earth, a possibility was raised that another planet we call Theia once crashed to Earth and eventually transformed into the Earth we now know and the moon we now know. It was even hypothesized that this impact is why the Earthland separated itself from each other from one giant continent. Like South America and Africa, that is like a puzzle piece when we put them together, including all the same material from the edges they meet. But that's been proven wrong since we know about tectonic movement and seafloor spreading that explain the continental shift better. While we are far from understanding how the moon came to be, It's such a blast going through the history of these theories because the moon has always been fascinating to us. In the time of ancient Sumerian and Greek, the moon is not just a symbol for certain gods, but also a way to tell the time. And then during ancient Greek is where astrology is considered to have a jump in our understanding of it thanks to Hipparchus of Nicaea, who invented the original concept of trigonometry. As a boy, he compiled records of weather, and then as an adult he measured the distance between Earth and the moon by studying the eclipse, which for someone who lived in 190 to 120 BCE, he actually got quite close. He also cataloged the stars and attempted to make a map of the entire night sky, using what scholars believe to be the first time someone used coordinates similar to latitude and longitude. He compared the location of the stars he made on his map and figured out that the stars he is observing are located differently from the location he knew from Babylonian record, which is one of the first time we found out that the Earth kinda wobbles a little bit on its axis sometimes, causing it to shift a little bit. This caused a significant problem back then since we are still using stars to signify when to celebrate certain events back then, so the timing of these events become harder to track, especially when those events are like the annual flooding of the Nile River. And this applies not just to stars but also events that are using lunar calendar. The Roman, which used calends to track time, which become the word for calendar, used the CCG lineup, which is using the realignment of the Earth, the Sun and the Moon to track time. Each of this period lasted 29.53 days, which made each month harder to track after there's enough pileup of leftover 0.47 days. The Earth orbits around the Sun is also changing with time, although very slowly due to Jupiter and Saturn both becoming more elliptical. The nearest and farthest Sun location from Earth is called perihelion and aphelion, which is currently on January and June each. All these shape what becomes the foundation of our civilization and how we proceed with dates and time. The book managed to show us how important the moon is for us, with it being just the right size and distance that allow us to have our own water just the way it is. If it was just about 10% bigger, it will pull us with its gravity, and if it was smaller, we will pull it into our gravity, which will result in a rematch between Theia and Earth. Also from our journey to the moon, we didn't just take things away like dust and rocks. We also left a few things behind like flags, and just like the fashion of partygoers and Everest climbers, we left behind a few other trash. But besides these useless things, we also put some retroreflectives that will reflect back laser directed at it. We currently have 3 left behind by Apollo 11, 14 and 15, another 2 left behind by Lunokhod 1 and 2 from Soviet, and another one by Chandrayaan-3 by India. They are used for lunar laser ranging experiment to measure the distance between Earth and the Moon, which is how we know that the Moon is getting further away from us each year at a rate of about 3.8 centimeters. There will one day be an Earth without the Moon, but that day is millions of years further that it's basically none of our business for now. Currently what we have with the Moon is the precious time that we have with it to learn more about how much it affects us. We use the Sun and the Moon to tell date and month, we know this, and just like we have circadian rhythm that are affected by the Moon, other animals are also affected by the Moon in various ways. Fishermen, for example, usually catch certain fish like urchin or crabs on a full moon, since they're usually larger or have more eggs on them than when it is full moon. Owls become more active, and some plants like bean sprout have their leaf movement affected by the lunar tide. It is so important for us to keep track of the moon that there was an evidence found in Scotland that we've been doing it in BCE, even before we found words to describe time. They go inside these pit holes to look at the moon and know what month they are in and what activities should they do during said month. It's actually quite an ingenious solution since the concept of date and time is not there yet, showing us once again that hunter-gatherers back then are smarter than modern conspiracy theories. There's also a very interesting story about a nebulous skyfish that was stolen by a couple of treasure hunters that must have thought that Uncharted is a cool non-fiction. These are objects older than ancient Babylonia meant to tell the time. It's not until during the age of Mesopotamia that the moon is no longer used for bare necessities. In their religion, their main god is the moon god Sin, his wife Ninga, and their son the sun, forming the first ever Holy Trinity. In this way, the moon gave us our very first religion that became integrated with how politics work in Mesopotamia. Their civilization have fallen, but they are considered to be the start of the study of astrology, with the 12 zodiac sign that we know now is from them. The book will go on to show us how the moon affected us throughout history, from ancient Mesopotamia to ancient Greek to more modern civilization like Rome and Egypt. The book of course also tackled Ptolemy and all his mistakes that makes the West for a brief moment believe that the universe revolves around Earth. At the time, the only one that challenged this view was Ibn al-Haytham, a Muslim scholar that became the father of optics. He recognized that Ptolemy ignored altogether the existence of the moon among many others. But since the East and West are even more separated at that time, this criticism didn't go anywhere. If anything, criticism against geocentrism became more blasphemous because of it. It took a long time of work from Copernicus, Thomas Harriot, Galileo, and Kepler that we finally got our moon back into the solar system and we correct course to heliocentrism. But even then, what happened to those three is not all well and done. Copernicus that started the whole thing was considered heretics and his teaching was equivalent to forbidden knowledge. Harriet got put into prison for a while, especially since she knew Guy Fawkes, the guy whose mask got more famous after V for Vendetta. Galileo was put into a one-sided trial in 1633 where he avoided getting hanged just because he pleaded guilty and denied heliocentrism. He is then put into house arrest until his death, where the church also denied his family his dead body for a while. And lastly, Kepler's mother was accused of witchcraft and put to jail. She only got out of prison years later and died soon after her release, while Kepler was left penniless until his death because of his defense of heliocentrism. The space is such an interesting space, and nowadays even ordinary people can have their own way to look at the stars without having to break major bank. And even developing countries have their own giant version of the telescope to look at further distance from Earth. In Southeast Asia, for example, Indonesia have both an observatory that people can schedule a visit to experience the difference in different tools for observing space. And if you like your history, the book is a combination of both astrology and history, and the author did a great job at combining both topics and present them in a way that is cohesive and compelling. But the way it is written is a long, never-ending and unbothered text, which I think is a missed opportunity to not add pictures that can enhance the reading experience. Reading the book long-term can give you that headache that school book gives since there's not enough breaks in between the long text. And all the pictures that can give additional context to the text are instead put in a separate section, which I think is a weird choice. I give this a 3.5. What do you think? Let me know if I missed anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.